Welcome to Hancock Conversations, the official Allan Hancock College podcast. Each episode features conversations with past and present Hancock students, staff, faculty, and community members as they share their stories, experiences, and perspectives on issues that matter to our college and community.
Okay. All right. Welcome to Hancock Conversations. I'm ASBG President Annie Ruiz, and today I'll be talking with Marcos Garcia. After taking some time away from college and navigating uncertainty, Marcos returned to Hancock with a new sense of purpose. He found community, confidence, and opportunities through roles like student ambassador and ASBG leader. He explored everything from art to architecture and now even therapy, all while discovering who he is and who he wants to become. We're excited to hear his story and lessons he learned along the way. Hi, Marcos.
What up?
I'm so excited. So if I'm smiling, I'm not trying to be creepy. I'm just so happy.
That was a pretty tough intro.
Oh,
I'm not gonna lie, that's way too much for me.
All right, I'm gonna start with the first question.
Gotcha.
Tell me a little bit about your background. Where'd you grow up, and how did you end up attending Hancock?
My background?
Yeah.
No, I'm just trolling. Sorry. Okay, so my background. What is my background? So, no. Okay,
How did you end up here?
So I grew up in a family, all sisters. I'm the only boy. My dad was not just my dad, both my parents. Both my parents were immigrants from Mexico, Zamora, Michoacan. And my dad immigrated here to work in the fields and to build up a life. And eventually he met my mom, who also immigrated here, but from the town next over. So they didn't meet each other until they got here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So their whole life was just kind of like an uphill battle where they were just constantly working like hard. And with my mother, it was with education. With my father, it was just purely like field work and other things, jobs that he could find. And, eventually they had their family. They had my oldest sister. Next they had my older sister. Then they had me and then my little sister. From there, that's kind of like where I'm at with my family, or where my family got to at this point right now.
Where did you grow up, and how did you end up attending Hancock?
Oh, okay. So I grew up here in Santa Maria. I've lived here my whole life, right? My sisters and my family moved around a lot, like within the town.
Oh, okay.
I've only moved twice. So growing up, it was always my parents' intention for all their kids to go to college. And so with me, I feel like that was kind of a bit more pushed onto it. Because in high school, I would get really good grades, significantly better than some of my other sisters. And so I was getting all A's, B's, and they're like, this kid's got potential. But to be honest, at the time when I was going to high school, before I got to college, school was the worst year. It was the worst thing for me. I hated school so much growing up.
I think I hated it. I hated high school, to be fair. I was not a fan of high school.
No, I hated, before coming to Hancock, I hated school. It was the worst thing ever. I couldn't stand it. I just didn't want to even further attend anymore at that point. But I still ended up going to college. And originally my degree was in art because I still am very passionate about it, but it was what I was passionate about at the time as well. So I go here and I come here with all of my friends right after high school. But it felt like I didn't belong here, primarily because it felt like I was comparing myself too hard to other people.
Yeah.
I didn't have a driver's license. I didn't have a job. And to top it all off, when I started going to the classes, I was incredibly unprepared. I had a notebook and a pencil. And yet I was taking these classes that required a lot more than that. And whenever I would go to these classes, every other student there just already had what they needed right on top, including other students that were also new to the campus that I recognized. And so it just felt like I was completely unprepared. And then eventually, one by one, all my friends started leaving college too. They all started dropping out. And I guess I kind of just followed the herd because eventually I was the last one to drop out. And so that's what happened with me. I told my parents straight up, I can't go to college anymore. It just doesn't feel right now. And then they told me okay, but you're going to work. And I was like, okay.
I mean,
straight up, yeah.
I have to.
And so from there for the next year or a couple months, I don't even think it was a year, but yeah, next couple of months, I just started working fast food job. I worked at Crumble when it first opened.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, you were in there, the Crumble scoop.
It was horrible. They hired 50 people.
Oh, I know they had such a big I remember I was in line for Crumble for the grand opening.
It was horrible, yeah. They hired 50 people, and nobody was getting shifts at one point. It was really bad. So eventually I had to leave that job and go work at other places. And the last job that I had before coming back to school was Firehouse Subs. Also, when it first opened.
Where's that by?
It's actually by Crumble.
Oh, by the Greek food place. I don't know the name.
Nick the Greek.
There we go.
Yeah, I think that's what it's called. So I worked there for a while, and then, but like throughout the entire time I wasn't going to school and I was just working. I eventually got my license, and then I got all my other stuff sorted out, and I was finally getting everything together, and it felt like I was really like becoming more and more into who, like, you know, more responsible basically. But I still was too lazy. But at that point, I was just lazy to go back to school. But it wasn't until my father, who I will say was one of the best things he ever did for me. Like, he just one day like came into my room, and like he got mad at me, and he was like, "When are you going back to school?" And I was like, I don't know. And I'm just over here like playing on my PC, and I was like, dude, I'm in the middle of like a CS2 match. Come on, man. Let's comp. And he's like, it's comp, man. This is CS:GO at the time.
I'm gonna get my rank up.
I'm off topic. Yeah, but this is CS:GO at the time. But I'm like in a comp match, and he's like looking at me. He's like, when are you going back to school? I'm like, I don't know, man. Like he's talking all in Spanish.
Did you think about school while you were working? Was like in the back of your mind that maybe I'm gonna go back, or did you have a timeline when you're go back?
Not really.
Okay.
To be honest, like my intention was that at this point I was too comfortable working, and so I was like, I'm probably never gonna go back. But then, after he said that, he had said, like I don't care anymore. You're gonna go back, and I was like,
that's so sweet.
No,
like a heart, I guess.
He was very mad.
Right.
He was very mad when he was speaking to me on that. He was like, you're going back to school. I don't care. You're going back. I was like, okay. And like the whole time while I was out of school, they were discussing with me, telling me like, no, dude, like you should do this major. You should do this major. And then eventually they came to a conclusion where it's like, you should do architecture, which is like very pushed onto me. And so that's what I came back to school originally. I came back to school that was when I finally came back to Hancock. And so like my first 2 semesters back, I was just doing a certificate of completion for architecture. And eventually I quit my job at Firehouse, and I was like jobless for a bit, but I wanted money.
Money.
I need money.
Yeah.
I need that money. So eventually my mom was giving me ideas where I could apply, and she was like, why don't you apply for a job at the school? And I was like, that doesn't sound too bad, you know?
Yeah.
Like avoid commute outside of school and just work here instead.
I didn't know you could get a job. I didn't know student worker was a thing.
I didn't know
until
either.
my sister recommended it for me. She was like, you know that you can work on campus. And I was like, you can? I was like, oh.
That's the thing. I didn't know either until my mom mentioned it. Hey, shout out Angela.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But so that was when I finally started to like search around for jobs at the school. Eventually I applied to the library, but somebody else had already gone the position at the time. And then the last 2 positions that I applied to was, was working at the Veterans Center, and this other one that was told by somebody at the Career Center, because I went to the Career Center to look for help, and they were very helpful, and they even were the ones that suggested me the job as a student ambassador. And I was like, what's that? And he was like, you're basically like a student TA around the school, and like outside of it. And I was like, oh. It was like, it's like, you'll get it.
That sounds fun.
And I was like, I'll just do it. And so I applied for it, and I was really surprised that I actually got called in for an interview. And so when I got called in for the interview, like obviously I was like really nervous, because I'm like, I have no connections, like I have nothing connecting me to the school at all, and I'm over here just about to like go into it like with nothing.
You said you put it as you just came in with the resume and yourself, or how would you put it?
I literally just came in. Yeah, I came in with the resume and just myself, because I do know a lot of the other ambassadors like had connections already and suggestions, but with me, like I went in with nothing at all. So
it was like a little leap you had to take.
I just said like screw it, and I went for it. And so when I did, like they were filling out a piece of paper in front of me like the whole time, like writing down notes, and my whole idea was just like I'm gonna fill out this paper like as much as possible, or like I'm gonna get them to fill out this paper as much as possible. Oh,
so you're gonna tell them like a lot about yourself.
Yeah, that's what I did. And so, not gonna lie, on my end, I felt like I probably didn't get the job. Like,
you're like.
But then eventually they called me back, and they were like, hey, could you come in for training? I was like, being an ambassador has been one of my favorite jobs at Hancock.
It's
and
such
I
a rewarding
it.
experience.
It is a rewarding experiences. It is a rewarding experience, and to top it all off, what makes it best is that our bosses there are some of the nicest people and most understanding
Stephanie,
people ever.
Patty, Maggie. Oh my gosh, they are such the sweetest people.
They are the sweetest people ever.
People.
And they're so understanding to like my situations and everyone else's, and like they're the best. They're the best. Shout out them.
I know I remember when I was an ambassador, they were just so understanding, and especially with Stephanie now being my advisor, she's like, we've gotten so close, and it's just like, love you, Stephanie.
Yeah.
I love you, Stephanie.
They're some of the most caring people in the world, and I genuinely cannot appreciate them more. I hope they see this and know that.
When you first started at Hancock, because I know you started with architecture, when you first started at Hancock, how were you feeling? What was like your kind of thought process? You know, what were you scared of? What were you excited for? What was your mind going into it?
My mind going to Hancock? So my mind going into Hancock was that, all right, well, up to this point in my life, I've only had bad experiences at school. Like, I've just absolutely hated it. And with me, I'm just going to, like, get this over with. Like, I'm going to come here. I'm going to get my certificate of completion. After every class, I'm just going to immediately go home and just not do anything. And that was honestly, like, one of my biggest mistakes in terms of coming here for my first 2 semesters. Because I should have done more when I could have. Especially since, like, I've learned, like, the longer that I've been here, the longer that you're here, the more that you realize that it's a lot better for you to, like, put yourself out there and actually participate in the events that we have around the school, because that's the best way that you're going to make friends at this campus. Like, everybody new who comes into Hancock or, like, college, just college in general, they all expect, like, oh, okay, I'll just meet some people, like, through my classes.
Yeah.
But what they don't realize is that a lot of classes are just lectures and note-taking.
Yeah, I think if I could, like, give one advice, it would be, like, don't just go to class, go home.
Yeah.
Like, stay, like, interact. Look at, I think, the bulletin board that always has events up, just go, because it's just so, if I could I'd implore people, stay after class, like, talk, converse, because I know classes, most people are, like, they're, like, locked in. So they'll, like, be taking notes. You won't have a lot of converse, and there's not a lot of group work in some classes. There isn't a lot of group work. But when you get to events, you get people in their, like, happy place. They're ready to communicate. They're ready to talk. It's, like, a space to, like, kind of mash and converse. So.
Honestly, yeah. I fully agree with that 100%. And I think that's a big mistake that a lot of people make. They always just go home right after class. And it's like, don't do that. Like, stay as long as you can and try to get to know people. Because I'll tell you right now, with most of those classes, you're not going to meet people naturally. Yeah. Like, you'd have to really go out of your way to, like, actually talk to people in that class, and even then you're not going to have much opportunity because the expectation when you come into class is that you're there to learn, and that's literally what that's for. Yeah. You're there to learn, and you're there to get a good grade. That's because everybody's trying to take notes and pass the class. Everyone's too focused on their education when they're in class, but outside of class, it's the complete opposite. That's where everybody converses and has fun. So that's a big mistake that people have to avoid, is that they can't rely on class to make friends. They have to actually go out of their way to make friends outside of class.
Because I know professors, like, I know a lot of professors who really try to incorporate group work. So they, like, people talk and converse. And I know, like, with communication classes and English classes, that's a lot of it. But I think going out and participating in the events, you'll really form those connections. Like, it's crazy.
It really does. Like, that's probably the only opportunity you're ever going to get with making friends is in probably like in an English class or communications class. That's probably your best bet to make friends in class. But don't try to, like, in other classes, basically. Don't try to make friends in a class unless, like, you think it's possible.
I would maybe say, like, not don't try, but just, like, be warned.
Yeah, just be warned that, like, you're most likely not going to be able to, because everybody's there to focus on their work and to get it done. And this isn't high school where you can just, like, mess around and, like, disrupt the class whenever you want. Like, we're all adults here. Yeah. You have, like, this is your future to focus on. And so that's why everybody's so locked in.
And also be yourself. I think people are getting definitely more quiet. Oh, my goodness. In the classes, everyone's so quiet. And I understand it. It's just, like, nervousness and fear of, like, saying the wrong thing. But being in student body government, it's, like, you can be yourself. Like, you be yourself and people will come to you, you know? Like, don't be afraid to, you know, just share what you have, you know?
Yeah, because everybody's so afraid that oh, it's just like high school. Like, I'm gonna get made fun of if I like try to do my own thing. It's like, no, dude, we're all adults here.
Yeah.
Like, if you were to make fun of somebody for being themselves, like, you'd be the one getting made fun of for that. Like, in all honesty, everybody would like hate you if you try to like hate on somebody for being themselves.
Well, no one that cares really. Like, if you're yourself, people are like, oh, that person's so cool. Like, I see in the G building when I'm getting my coffee, so much diversity.
Yeah.
And seeing people like with all their like, so I see some people that have like these thrifted finds and these cute little things in there. I'm like, oh, I want to be you. You look so cool.
I feel like especially at this campus, like nobody cares like if nobody cares like if you're putting up a performance, because like everybody here really loves it when you're yourself.
During your break from college, what did you learn about yourself? What did you figure out, like your self-discovery era?
My self-discovery and my gap year.
Yeah.
I actually discovered more after my gap year. Like when I came back to Hancock, I discovered more that that I like to be a lot more social than I actually am. Like, I'm not the type of person to approach people first, but if I get used to somebody, like I can get very like social, like, and it's really awesome.
I think, I noticed that there's so many, like, beautiful people hiding under, like, shyness and nervousness. Because I'll go up to people and be like, hey, and they'll be shy at first. But once you build that connection, it's, like, literally like a firework. It's, like, like, they explode into this beautiful personality. And so I've learned to be very patient when it comes to, because I'm shy. I feel like I'm very introverted sometimes. So I'll be like, oh, no. Because you kind of lose your spark, I guess, because you get really nervous. Like, I don't want to mess this up.
Yeah.
But you're really not messing anything up. You're just being yourself.
I did fall in love with this campus through the people, because when I started off as an ambassador, that was when I really started to meet like all these incredible people. I met you, I met Avery, I met all my friends that you had mentioned, and then it was through that I also joined ASBG as well eventually because of my position as an ambassador. Yeah. And so ASBG's leadership, but when
rep the leadership. Oh, it's on the other side.
Yeah,
president
of leadership right here. So through ASBG, I met even more incredible people in my semester going there, and it's just been like an uphill. It's just been uphill since I became an ambassador. Like with my experiences here at Hancock, it really like opened up my view, and it really helped me become a lot more of a social person. Like, it's really incredible how much like that job has done for me in terms of like my social skills. And then, let's see, to honestly like, oh my gosh, it can honestly be like such a struggle to get out of bed, but like what gets me out of bed is like knowing that if I come to school today, I gotta see and like I gotta converse with all these amazing people and just like enjoy my time like at school. Yeah,
you really build that connection, and then you have people care about you, like genuinely. I remember I didn't go to school because something had happened, and then Avery and all the ambassadors told me like, oh, are you all right? And it's just like, it's just heartwarming to know that like I've made so many connections in this school, and I've also grown a lot. We've also grown as like people and our character, because I remember when I first started here, I was definitely like had, I guess, the high school mentality. I was like, oh, just the same thing. I'll just go to my classes and leave. Or like I was super immature as well, but then
it's like nervous.
Yeah, nervous. I think you're still like figuring everything out.
Yeah, definitely.
And so having ambassador and just going up, I just discovered actually who I am and how. You know,
you definitely grow a lot more as a person once you start attending college.
Yeah,
because that's like your real first introduction to the real world.
Yeah, it's like your first like screening, I guess.
Yeah, screening, like preview. Yeah, and it's a really incredible thing, just like how close and just how many amazing people you can meet here because you decided to open up a little bit.
I know, if you just share a little bit of yourself, you'll just get all this like love and warmth. Warmth is, I can describe it like warmth. Yeah. Like joy.
Honestly, I fully agree. Like you'll have the best time at college if you really put yourself out there. It's incredible. It's not like high school where people are, like I said, where people are just going to make fun of you for being yourself, because at this college you get praised for being yourself. And it's just an amazing, like I've had such incredible experiences here, and in all honesty, this has been like one of the better times of my life, from just like all the amazing people that I've met here, and every day I'm grateful for that.
I know, I've met all of my friends come from Hancock. I think I was really lonely starting Hancock and also it was kind of all of my high school friends were going to a 4-year university, and I decided to stay because I didn't want to leave my family. I felt like I wasn't ready to leave. And so that was definitely something that picked at my brain a lot. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm here at community college and I see on social media everyone's at a 4-year, and it really did make an impact. I wanted to ask you, was that ever something that crossed your mind? Was that something that was a challenge for you?
Same thing, seeing like other people. Yeah, that was it still is to this day, in all honesty. Just seeing like all these people my age that I used to know just like be so much further than me in life. And it's one of the hardest like pills to swallow, because you have to realize that everybody moves at their own pace. Yeah. And I know that's something that people like drill into your head a million times over and over and over again, but that's because it's the truth. If it wouldn't be said so much if it weren't factual. Like everybody moves at their own pace and everybody does their own thing whenever they do it. And it's harsh, but it's true, you know? And in all honesty, like I still have a hard time like processing that and like accepting it. And sometimes I do wish like I wish I knew what I wanted to do sooner, because then I would be, I'd be out of here by then.
Yeah.
And this and that. But no, because like I'm switching majors, like I'm going to be here for even longer. And I want to fall behind even more. But at the same time, it's like, so what?
That's what I think. Yeah, I was always so honed in. I'm like, oh my goodness, like I'm gonna be at community college. Like everyone's posting about this, and there's so much ahead. I was like, there's so much ahead of me.
Yeah.
And then I talked to students in my classes, and they were like, you're at the perfect time. Like you're putting a time limit on yourself. I think that's the best advice I heard, is that you put your own time limit. Like my parents or none of my classmates are like, you have to do this by this time. It's just me having those expectations. And it's definitely something that never really goes away, but it was definitely a lot stronger in my first years. And it was like a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely something where whenever I do bring it up with my mom, like that feeling, she always tells me like the same thing, where it's like, make sacrifices now so you can enjoy the rest of your life. And that's kind of like one of those things, sacrifice some of your time in your youth for education. That way, like in your mid or late 20s, and from then on afterwards, you can live an easy life.
I know my dad's all about school. My mom too, because they didn't go to college, so they're just high school, and they're always telling me like, take your time, like just get through school. Like that's all you have to do is just get through school. And I know you were talking about challenges, so I do wanted to get into challenges. What's some challenges you faced at Hancock?
In all honesty, I've had such a great time here that I haven't really had many challenges here. The only challenges that I've had here at school were a direct result from things that have happened outside of my life. Like I remember there was this one semester I was really like going through it, because like that was last semester actually, because back in February, my father passed away, and so I failed a lot of my classes that semester. Because it was just a really big struggle at that time. And not only that, it was kind of like the whole like thing that my dad taught me in itself, where definitely on the day that it happened, I was like a mess. But after that, even up till now, I'm still sad about it. And it's something that's really hard for me to think about. But at the same time, I don't react to it, because it was just something he taught me growing up, because like I mentioned, I'm the only boy in my family. And so when you're the only boy in like a traditional Mexican family, you're going to get treated a lot differently from your sisters. And so with him, his whole goal was just like making me like emotionally tough, because I was a crybaby growing up. So I guess that it's a direct result of that, from what he taught me, was that if you ever want to be like a strong person that can take care of his family, you have to have like a strong mental fortitude, like in order to handle like the struggles of being a parent and of just like being a family man. And I was like, okay. And so that was like basically like my whole shtick, was that I took those lessons into fruition, and it's kind of like built me up to like I guess like who I am right now, where it's like a lot of bad stuff is always happening like around me, but in terms of like that's always attacking like my mental, but like I never like really show it, because that was how my dad taught me to. It's not really repressing it. It's just more of like, don't let it affect what you're doing. Yeah.
So like focus on the here and now.
Yeah. But I will say it was like, What I will say, it was a bit embarrassing though, because when I did get the news, and Avery was actually there when it happened too. Like when I did get the news, like I just started like crying, like while I was in like the ASBG room, or not ASBG room, but like or no, it was the ASBG room. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I started like crying, and everybody around me like didn't know what to say. So like everybody was just like kind of off to the side, which I'm not angry about either, because I completely understand, like, what are you gonna do like if someone just starts suddenly crying? Like, but like then I left afterwards, and then so that was probably like the only time like I ever showed emotion in that situation, like here at school. But yeah, I have my dad to thank for building up like how I react to like situations like that, or how I react to it afterwards, and like not showing and like focusing more on like what's important in front of me. So that's definitely like something that I have him to thank for.
Oh, that's so sweet. So I was like, I'm a crybaby, so I'm like, I'm trying not to shed a tear.
Like,
but
you gotta look over at Avery real quick.
But I want to talk about, your support system.
Support system?
Yeah. So I know you had the ambassadors. Was that really what helped you continue and going? What was your motivator to continue at college?
I didn't really have a motivator, really. I mean, I had people there for me, obviously. Obviously, you have people there for you. You have your friends, your family, and, like, I had everybody around me that was there for me. And as much as people try to check in on me, I was always just like, I'm chilling. So, but I'd say my main motivator for me was going back to my father, because he was so focused on like trying to set me up good, and just trying to like his whole thing was just making it so that way, like, I don't know how to explain it. I guess the best way to explain it is that the reason why I kept going to school even after that happened was just because I kept hearing him tell me in my head, like, or because I kept hearing myself in my head saying, like, this is what dad would want. And so I was like, okay. That's literally why. That was, like, what got me to keep on going. Because he was the kind of person where he wouldn't want something, like, as tragic as that to, like, put my life on pause. And so that's why I kept coming to school, and why I kept acting so normally afterwards. You know, like, obviously it's something that still affects me to this day, and I still get really upset about it. But I don't show it, because that was the kind of man that he raised me to be. And on top of it, that was the kind of man that he told me, wait, hold on, let me rephrase that. But it was the kind of thing that he told me where, like, to not let things like that affect what's important, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's how that kept me going.
I know a lot of students would share your same sentiments, because I've talked to many students who had sadly had a parent pass away. What would advice you would give them if going through a tough time? Like, what helped you, you know?
Advice? Well, one thing I will say right now is that everybody is incredibly different.
Yeah.
So the way that I handle things is definitely not healthy for other people or for a normal person. But I guess my best advice is to don't do escapism. Like, don't.
What is escapism?
Don't participate in escapism. And how I like to phrase it is through like a thing that I watched in the past. I'm not going to say the name because everyone would like immediately cringe. It was like Neon Genesis Evangelion. The whole purpose of the show, like as weird as it is, the whole purpose of the show is to teach you that escapism is not the answer. And what it is that when you use like alternate things to like escape reality, like it's like you don't like what your reality is, or you don't like how life is looking, so you escape to something else to distract yourself, or to just like escape the world as it is, you know. So like an example would be like oh, my father passed away, but like, you know, but drugs would help me like cope with it, like
not finding a bad coping mechanism.
Like basically it's like yeah, but this bad substance would like help me escape from like my reality, so that's what I'm gonna do. It's like, no, like don't do that. Like it's like you said, don't find a bad coping mechanism, you know. Find something that's healthy, find something that really like I don't know, like
facing your fears. I think I understand what you're saying, like facing reality and learning to kind of face reality as it is, live with the reality.
Don't escape reality through bad ways or through like major distractions that's gonna put your life on pause. The best way I can think about it is that you have to face it directly, and it can be something very difficult to do for anybody. But that's honestly the only way to like heal and move past like every situation, is just to face it directly and like handle it, because you're always going to have like a support group around you. There's always going to be people that care about you. And so the best thing you can honestly do is just like let those people into your barrier and let them help you. And then to face those hardships directly, because you'll never get anywhere in life if you're too afraid of confrontation or being honest.
If you feel comfortable sharing, what was your kind of coping mechanism that you found to help you through that?
My coping mechanism?
Yeah.
My coping mechanism was just to keep pushing forward. And like I said, the reason why I said like I didn't want to like have that be the thing that I share for everyone else to have their as their coping mechanism, or one that I recommend, is because as much as I love my father, it definitely wasn't a good lesson to learn growing up to like push. No, it wasn't his way of teaching it, but it was more of like the way that I kind of learned how to like deal with that kind of stuff was like it wasn't his intention to teach it to me like this, but it's how I ended up learning it from like how he taught me, was that like to kind of like push down your emotions.
It's like the stigma around men, like don't cry, like men
shouldn't
cry.
Yeah. Yeah, that was like that whole thing, and so was like the whole thing that made me like quote unquote cope with it. Was just like focus on like what you're doing right now, and then just like if you get sad about it, like don't get upset, you know?
Yeah.
That was like the whole thing growing up. It was just that like if I cried or like did anything, like if I ever had any negative emotions at all, it was immediately like it was like punishable basically. So it's kind of like just being like forced to be always happy, but that's not healthy for a human.
I know.
And so that's something that I really can't recommend to anybody.
Yeah.
It's just like, for me, it's just like so integrated to the point where like it's stuck with me.
I agree with your sentiment. I think the same thing, Hispanic household, it was way, when I was young, it was like, don't cry, like toughen up, you know? And so, oh, that's fine. But it was kind of like just toughen up, don't cry, like don't let your emotions show. And I think coming to college and seeing these people comfortable with like, let out your emotions, like tell it how you, because I went to an Active Minds, a club on campus, and we had like a sit down group, and it was the first time I was able to kind of share how I'd be feeling. I started bawling, and I didn't even know I was gonna cry.
It's like the emotional release, basically.
Yeah.
Because you stockpile it, and then when you finally let it go, it comes out in like waves.
I think that's what I've really trying to work on, and share the sentiment of like, don't bottle it up, because like the more you bottle up, the worse the outcomes. It's like the little lava, like you know. So.
For me, it's just one of those things where it's like it was so heavily integrated for me growing up that I'm kind of like stuck on doing it. So it's something that I definitely have to work on, but just like letting myself be more like emotionally open, but to also control it too, because whenever I am emotionally open about how I feel, I can get really annoying with it, and then I can talk way too much about it too. And my friends definitely have had to deal with that in the past before, like multiple times. But I do thank them a lot because they have dealt with that.
I know it's had such a big impact on you during school. Would you also like to mention a person who had an impact on you from this campus?
A person who had an impact on me on this campus?
Yeah.
That's really difficult because
there's so many. I have a list.
My guy, don't ask me that. Don't ask me that. It's too difficult.
Well, let's do like a list. We'll do a list. Not tier list, but
pull up the tier list right now.
Not the ratings, but basically just name, I guess, like a little shout out, because I've had a lot of people impact me. I can't just name one.
You shout out?
Yeah.
Okay, so
but explain how they impacted you.
Okay, so I would definitely. Okay, so in no particular order, let me start off with the easiest people that off the top of my head are my bosses. They are amazing people. They're so understanding, and they have helped me with a lot of things. And even when I screw up, they still have me stick around, and I cannot appreciate it enough. They're genuinely like some of the best people that I've met at this campus. And I appreciate every day that they're my bosses. And oh my gosh, I really can't thank them enough for everything. And they've just had an impact on me to teach me that. They've taught me that kindness is just always something that's free. They've taught me that kindness is free to give to other people.
I don't mean to cut you off, but you said something where you've made mistakes and they've forgiven you. It literally made me remember of first attending college. I think a lot of people think they make one mistake and it's over.
Yeah, they do.
Because I think I don't know why a lot of people share this, but it's just that you fail that one class, like it's over, it's done. Like you're never going to get built up. And I know I've struggled with it, and I wanted to ask you, I know because I was going to lose my thought. I wanted to ask you, what was that realization like? No, it's not forever. I can try again.
That realization, probably like the first time I started talking to people in like the ambassador group or like my coworkers, because I definitely did not because definitely at the beginning of me working there, I was still in like again, my social skills were really horrible and I was really bad at picking up on cues. So a lot of like my jokes and the way that I acted at the start of it, I knew I definitely messed up on that, because I definitely know that a lot of the ambassadors weren't very fond of me when I first started working there. But eventually over time, I finally started to mellow down and my social skills got better and I started like pick up better on cues and everything. And so it was able to really help me like realize that, hey, like I can interact with these people a lot better. And thankfully so, because of that, like I can proudly say that I'm like basically friends with like all the ambassadors, and that I definitely am a lot more warmed up to than I was at the start of it. Yeah, so that's a really great thing. It was a really great reminder that even though at the beginning I was really messing up like how I came off, like I still ended up getting accepted by the end of it because I grew and changed as a person. I was given that opportunity to by them.
I love how you figured socially that, you built that up and you created a great group of friends. Academically, I know you said you've changed your major multiple times. Did you ever have that feeling towards like changing your major or like failing a class, if you have, where it's like, damn, this was my one shot, but then realizing, no, I have many more, like academically? Academically?
Not really. For me, it's just more like I kind of already know that changing your major multiple times is like different. Like, and I already know it's not too much of a problem. It kind of is, but like at the same time, it's like it's one of those things where you're young, and so you have this opportunity to like look around different career paths. And that's the really wonderful thing about college, is that they really give you the opportunity to like search around and look for like these incredible things around the campus and like incredible job opportunities. So, and I really had that with that. I guess it's just more of like, I'm more fearful just that like I'm going to take way too long finding a career that I want.
I know I was nervous about changing majors. I thought like I had that thing. Is it sunken clause fallacy?
Sunken clause.
I got no clue. It's the fallacy where because you spent so much time into it, you have to stick with it. And I think, have you ever experienced that? Because I know a lot of people think that just because they've done all these classes for their major, they're like, I can't change.
That's how I'm feeling with architecture, not going to lie.
Really?
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like, I hate architecture.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not passionate about it.
Yeah, I'm not passionate about architecture at all. Here's what I will say. Architecture classes here are great, right?
I'm taking one.
Yeah. Like, architecture is like one of the best careers you can go into, but it's just not for me. It's just not for me at all.
I know before I was medical and I was doing a bunch of medical, and I was really nervous to tell people I had switched. And then I went to a counselor, Maria. She was so sweet in the transfer center. And she told me that, like it's really normal for people to switch and change career paths. Yeah. And you're so young. So it's like, why not just switch? I mean, the time's going to pass anyway. So you might as well do it with what you love to do.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And I can agree with that 100%. Let's see. Real quick.
Back to the tier list. I totally forgot. Yeah.
No, you're good. So the tier list. All right. So there was my bosses. I gave them a shout out. Then there are the ambassadors themselves. Some of the most incredible people I've ever met. Every single one of them are so amazing, and they're super fun. They're super social, and they're the reason why it led me to growing more as a person, social ability wise.
Hardworking, my goodness, I see them
incredibly
out there
hardworking.
setting up those events.
Yeah, they're all amazing. They're all amazing, and like they were the starting reasons as to why I wanted to come to school more.
Oh,
Let's see what's up next. I'll give a shout out to this class. Shout out ASBG, one of the funnest classes I ever had.
am I pointing at it?
Like
I am.
it was a plug. It's a plug. It's a plug. Yeah, no. So shout out ASBG. It was one of the best classes I've ever had. I highly recommend it. It's something that you take. I really wish I could take it spring semester, but unfortunately I can't because I got to take another class for my major that I'm switching to. So it's really sad, but I recommend that if you see an ASBG event going on campus, please attend it. It is an incredible class. Try attending the class, even if you can't. Show up to the meetings.
Take it. I'm saying the same
like
sentiment.
if you can't,
I'm not biased.
Like if you can't join the class, you're still able to attend the meetings, right?
Yeah, you can attend the meetings. The meetings are
attend the meetings. Attend the meetings. Don't expect the food though.
Monday, 12 to 1:50.
Don't expect food though.
Don't expect food.
Yeah, don't expect food if you're not in the class.
On the topic of ASBG, what made you want to? Because you were previously an ASBG student. What made you want to join ASBG?
It was my friend Kayleen. Shout out Kayleen. Yeah. So I'll give those guys a shout out last. But so my friend Kayleen was in ASBG, and sometimes I would go into the class just so like me and JP and Dom would go into the class sometimes, just to like check it out and say hi to her. And it was really cool what we saw in there. And then we always went to the events too because we would help out with this. We would help out with the setup too. Mm-hmm. So I guess like at the time there wasn't many students like helping with the setup. So
yeah, it was a little sparse.
So a lot of the time there would be a lot of ambassadors. They'd ask for the ambassadors for help. Mm-hmm. And so we would help out with the events a lot, and I'd also end up helping out with the events a lot too. And so through that reasoning, I got to help the setup. I got to meet some of the people in the class, and I got to attend the events afterwards as well. Mm-hmm. And they were great, and I enjoyed the events so much that I was like, I kind of want to be a part of this more. So that was what really pushed me to like join ASBG. Mm-hmm. And when I did join it, it was like one of the best classes I ever had. It was awesome. I love that class so much.
ASBG, not biased. I love ASBG.
I love ASBG so much. It's so incredible. Yeah, look at Avery, bro. She's like jumping in her seat right now.
How did you first grow? I know you started. Did you start ASBG in your first year, or when did you start ASBG?
No, I started ASBG in my second year.
Oh, how would you say you've grown from starting ASBG to maybe starting ASBG again, but ending ASBG?
Wait, what do you mean by that?
Like, how have you grown as a person?
Grown as a person?
Yeah. Did it mold you? Did it change you in a way?
Oh, did it change me? Oh,
yeah.
oh, my bad. So, with ASBG, the whole point of the class is like leadership and like putting things into action. Mm-hmm. And so I can definitely say there was opportunities for me to do that. And when that did happen, I did take into action because I remember for one of the events, like things got like kind of uncoordinated for a bit because of how it was like one of the first events of the year, and I worked with a lot of like the newer students in ASBG, and like the only experience I had with it was just helping with setup and participating in like the previous events, so I kind of already knew a bit what was going on already. And so it was a bit wild because it felt like with that one event I ended up taking like initiative and really like stepping up and started getting everything like around us done. Like I was going from place to place. I was asking like people to do this, do that, and then like I was even like doing stuff myself, and like so like it was probably like one of the very few times in my life where I've actually felt like a leader.
Oh,
like not gonna lie,
leader. I love that little. I love when like being because I always I don't like not forget, but I'm just like, oh, when someone tells me like you're a leader on campus, you guys are leaders. I was like, kind of like, oh, okay. I was
like, low key, yeah, we're kind of leaders.
Low key, I guess we are.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned switching your major, so let's talk about that. Why did you choose to shift your major? I know you said you're uninterested, but was it just basically career? Where did you change it to? I'm sorry, therapy, huh?
It's
sorry.
Like kind of right now, yeah. I'm still trying to like get into like the motion of it, but I kind of already have all the classes lined up for it. But yeah.
Oh, okay.
The whole reason I'm switching is because it kind of like takes in a place like where I want to be at in life in the future, where it's like my whole goal is that I want to be like a family man where like I can be able to work at home and like I can be like a stay-at-home dad while I work and make money for my family, and then my wife can just do whatever she wants, like on phone.
Slay.
Yeah, she can go follow her dreams while I'm like at home, like being a stay-at-home dad and like still earning money.
Okay.
Like that'd be pretty tough. That's a really awesome. That'd be a really.
Oh,
awesome
so you would like to work from home?
Yeah, I like to work from home so I can like raise kids, like raise my kids.
Oh, okay.
That's why I said like the whole intention is like that's like the perfect picture for me. Is like, okay, like my wife, she can like go do her own work or follow her own dreams. She can do whatever she wants, and then like I'm gonna be at home like taking care of the kids while I like work, like because like I'll just be that goated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, of course. What really?
And so I think therapy would like be real. So I know therapy lines up with that really well because that's literally what my mom does.
I know
like, right now.
You're just following in her footsteps.
Yeah. She's like she works at home, and like we see her all the time. It's not like in the past where like she worked at an office before prior to that, and like we wouldn't see her till like the afternoon. But now she like she does online. She works at home, helps her patients through calls because obviously there's always going to be those patients where they just can't stand like the in-person interaction. So they work better through like calling or other things like that.
Okay.
And so she helps out with them on call. And then when she has time in between calls, she'll do what she needs to around the house. And so it's just really liberating for her. It gives her a lot of free time. And to top it off, she makes a lot of money off of it too. So like, I'm going to be like, dang, I want to be the same thing. I want to do the same thing.
Is that what really pushed you and like that was like kind of your motivation? So, like, I'm going to choose this.
Yeah. Also because architecture is not working out for me. I can not do math. I can't do math. No, don't even say the word around me. It's like the word job application for some people. Oh, sorry. we might have to censor that. I said it again.
I'm currently unemployed. Well, not right now. Ambassador. Soon
really?
To be. Well, we'll see.
Become an ambassador again.
Maybe. I have to wait till training happens.
Let's kick out JP. No, I'm sorry, JP.
I think we should kick out Marcos.
What?
Make room.
What? No.
So, what would you say to students right now who are feeling stuck or unsure what to do or really at a crossroads? Like, I want to do this, I don't know how to do this. Like, they're just unsure. What advice would you give?
What advice would I give them?
As like a seasoned expert.
My advice for that would be like, think about where you want to be at in your future, right? Like, picture what your perfect future would be. And then think about what kind of job would get you there, but do it in a way where like think about one that you would thoroughly enjoy, or just like something that you're already good at. That'd be my like advice.
I would think talk to a counselor.
Definitely talk to a counselor as well. Definitely
talk to a counselor.
Talk to a counselor and stick to one counselor after you found the one that you really like. That's like something that should be highly recommended. Is that you should really find a counselor you're really comfortable with and just stick with them, because you don't want to like meet up with multiple different counselors each semester and like have them all like say different things. It's a lot better. I highly recommend that you just stick with one counselor after you found the one that you like. Also,
like making connections with staff.
Yeah, definitely making
connections. There's so many sweet staff. I could shout Stephanie, Patty, Maggie, Henry,
I'm gonna give a shout out to Dr. Walters. Yeah, like, there was one time I was working in an event with Avery off camera and another one of our coworkers, Kyler. We were working like a really big event in Lompoc, and Dr. Walters just like passes by our table and he's like, "You guys hungry?" And I was like, I mean, you know, like I can eat. I'm probably getting something afterwards.
I can eat.
He opens up his jacket.
It's just in his jacket.
He pulls out a pack of beef jerky. He tosses it on the table. He's like, "There you guys go." And I was just like,
"Do they do it like the cloak where they have it in that pocket?"
Yeah,
and they're like,
"Here, really?"
Like
they it was in the secret pocket. Like,
I want to have a secret pocket.
They pull up in there with like all these like fancy like goodie bags and all that stuff. And Dr. Walters, like a real one, pulls up in there. He's like, "Yeah, I just stopped at the gas station, got like a Pepsi and like some beef jerky."
He's
like,
so casual about it too.
Really, and then like an absolute real one, he just like tosses it on our table and he's like, "I got you guys."
I'm imagining.
And he walks away. And I'm like how much like I can't even describe it. It's just unfathomable.
Special experience.
Yeah, I ate most of that beef jerky, by the way.
I imagine you guys like foxes, like her, you know, where like they start tearing at the bag.
No,
opening.
Kyler doesn't eat that.
She's a vegetarian?
Yeah.
Vegetarian?
Oh, okay. Yeah, she's a vegetarian. So it was just me and Avery. And like
munching on the beef jerky.
Well, no, like Avery ate like one piece of beef jerky, and then like she ate it like this, like, and then like I snatched it out of her hand.
I love beef jerky teriyaki.
I was like, that's mine, beef jerky.
But yeah, I would say make connections. To sum it all up, make connections with staff.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've had the best experience with. I could gush about all of them. Staff. Talk to a counselor.
Kurt's pretty cool.
Kurt.
I love participating in his midterms.
Oh my goodness. I love seeing his crime scenes out there.
Because
cute.
I love just acting in his midterms. It's so fun.
Continue.
I love just making the students as confused as possible. Like his whole shtick is he tells me like just make the students as confused as possible. I'm like, that's gonna be so easy because I already make people confused on the daily normally.
I think I was another sentiment. Talk with your professors.
Mm-hmm.
I know Kurt is a professor. Talk with your professors.
Like criminal justice.
They're so sweet. I've met so many professors where they're actually the sweetest people of my life, and they're just like they just want to talk. They're just like, "What's up?" They want to help you. Mm-hmm. Everyone here is for you to help you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Literally, there's so many people. There's so many people here who are very passionate about their jobs, and I mean, it clearly shows through like the amount of effort and like things that they do for their students. I mean, like, shoot, like we wouldn't be in this podcast if people weren't
without
about their
staff,
job.
you know.
Shout out the staff
Stephanie,
right there.
It's like, Chris,
y'all
Ricardo,
yes,
Jeremy,
everybody in here.
All right, so I think that thank you, Marcos.
Well, hold up. There's
one more shout out. One more shout out.
So one more shout out. Oh yeah, I forgot about that shout out. Yeah, so I like to give the biggest shout out to my four friends my three friends, like the friend group that I mentioned.
Yeah.
That's JP, that's Kayleen, and that's Dom. You guys are amazing people, and I could not give enough words to like. No amount of words could no amount of words can like justify just how much amazing people you are. So I'm not even gonna try. All right. So don't feel like this is a cop out, but just know that there's way too many good things about you guys to say that I just cannot like describe here and now because there wouldn't be enough time for it.
So thank you, Marcos. And this has been the conclusion of Hancock Conversations. And thank you to everyone in the back. We have Avery, we have Chris, Ricardo, and Jeremy back there. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time for more students and stories.
Thanks for listening to Hancock Conversations, the official podcast of Allan Hancock College. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe, share the episode, and follow Allan Hancock College for more stories, insights, and opportunities. Until next time, thanks for being part of the conversation.